The dog refused to drink. I held the bowl closer, tilting it so the water shimmered under the clinic's fluorescent lights. "Come on, girl," I murmured. "Just a sip." But she didn't move. Not a flinch, not a lick. Her golden eyes locked onto mine like she was trying to tell me something urgent. She was a stray, found curled up near the old railroad tracks. No collar, no tags, just matted fur and a quiet intensity that set her apart from the usual scared, skittish dogs we got at Oak Ridge Animal Clinic. The officer who brought her in said she hadn't growled, hadn't whined, just followed him silently, like she'd been waiting for him. But now, with the water bowl between us, she recoiled like I'd offered poison. Dr. Carter, the clinic's oldest vet, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Never seen a dog turn down water before," he mused. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He'd been in this business for 40 years. If something unsettled him, it meant something was wrong. I tried again, this time with an ice cube, usually a surefire way to get any dehydrated dog interested. But the second it clinked against the metal bowl, she jerked back, ears flattening. A low, uneasy whine escaped her throat. That's when I knew. This wasn't just fear, this was memory. Dr. Carter crouched beside her, his movements slow. "Let's take a look," he said, gently prying her jaws open. And then he froze. His face went pale. For 5 full seconds he didn't speak, just stared into her mouth like he'd seen a ghost. "Josh," he finally said, voice tight, "get the camera." I grabbed the clinic's digital camera, hand shaking. When I returned, Dr. Carter was still holding her mouth open, his fingers steady, but his breath uneven. "Look," he whispered. I leaned in. Embedded in the roof of her mouth, just behind her front teeth, was a small, metallic disc. Smooth, artificial, and it was humming. Dr. Carter's grip on her muzzle tightened slightly. "That's not natural," he said. "Someone put that there." The dog, Abby, we'd started calling her, watched us with those knowing eyes, like she'd been waiting for this moment, like she'd been waiting for us. And then, from the lobby, the clinic's front door creaked open. A man's voice, too polite, too calm, called out, "Hello? I think you have my dog." The man stood in the doorway, his boots too clean for someone who claimed to have been searching the streets for a lost dog. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I felt Abby tense beside me, her body pressing against my leg like she wanted to disappear. Dr. Carter straightened up slowly, his voice steady but firm. "Can I help you?" The man's gaze flicked to Abby, then away, too fast, like he was avoiding looking at her directly. "Yeah," he said, pulling a folded photo from his pocket. "This is her. Got out of my yard 3 days ago. Name's Luna." The photo showed a German shepherd, similar to Abby, but something was off. The markings weren't quite right. I glanced at Abby's scar, a thin, jagged line above her left paw, and then back at the photo. No scar. Dr. Carter noticed it too. He crossed his arms. "You got any vet records? Microchip info?" The man's smile tightened. "Left all that at home, just want my dog back." Abby let out a quiet growl, so low I almost missed it. The man's fingers twitched, like he was fighting the urge to reach for something. A weapon? A leash? My pulse pounded in my ears. Then the door chimed again. A woman walked in, holding a whimpering chihuahua. "Oh, sorry," she said, blinking at the tension in the room. "Am I interrupting?" The distraction was enough. Abby suddenly lunged, not at the man, but at the counter, knocking over a tray of instruments with a loud crash. The man flinched, and in that split second Dr. Carter stepped between him and Abby. "I think you should leave," he said, voice low. The man's face darkened. For a heartbeat, I thought he might argue. Then he stuffed the photo back into his coat. Fine, but this isn't over. He turned and walked out, but not before I saw the soles of his boots, stained with red clay, the kind only found near the abandoned Miller farm on the edge of town, the same place Abby had been found. The second the door closed, Abby stopped growling. She sat down, panting lightly, like she'd just won a battle. The woman with the chihuahua stared at us. Should I come back later?" Dr. Carter forced a smile. No, we're good." But his hands were shaking. After the woman left, he locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. "We need to get that thing out of her mouth. Now." The surgery was quick. Dr. Carter worked with precision, his hand steady despite the tension in his jaw. When he finally extracted the chip, he held it up to the light. It was smaller than a fingernail, smooth and unmarked, still emitting a faint rhythmic pulse. "This isn't a tracker," he muttered. "It's something else." Abby, freed from the foreign object, immediately lapped up water for the first time since she'd arrived. She drank like she'd been starved for days, her whole body relaxing with each gulp. Dr. Carter watched her, his expression unreadable. "She wasn't refusing water because she was scared," he said. "She was refusing because that thing was telling her to." That night I stayed late, sleeping on the clinic's couch with Abby curled up beside me. Around 2 a.m., a noise jolted me awake, a scrape of metal against concrete. Abby's head snapped up, ears pricked. Then the sound of glass breaking. Someone was inside. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but Abby did something unexpected. She didn't bark, didn't growl, she just watched, like she knew exactly what was happening. Footsteps crept down the hall, stopping outside the exam room. The doorknob turned, and then the lights flicked on. A masked figure froze in the doorway, a crowbar in one hand. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then Abby stood up, her tail stiff, her eyes locked onto the intruder. The figure took a step back. Abby took a step forward. And then, the intruder ran. I chased them to the back door, but they were already gone, vanishing into the night. When I turned back, Abby was sitting calmly in the hallway, like nothing had happened. The only evidence of the break-in was the shattered glass in the empty cabinet where we'd stored the chip. It was gone. Dr. Carter arrived within minutes, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. "They knew where to look," he said. Then he pulled something from the wreckage, a single business card, crisp and white, with nothing but a phone number printed in bold black ink. No name, no logo, just 7 digits that felt like a threat. Abby nuzzled my hand, her warm tongue rough against my skin. I looked down at her, and for the first time, I realized she wasn't just a dog who'd escaped something terrible. She was a dog who knew things, and whoever was after her wasn't going to stop until they got her back. The business card burned a hole in my pocket as I drove Abby to my apartment that night. Dr. Carter had insisted we leave the clinic immediately. Whoever had broken in clearly knew where to find us. And the last thing we needed was another confrontation. The streets were empty, the glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. Abby sat upright in the passenger seat, her gaze locked on the side mirror like she expected headlights to appear behind us at any moment. I kept checking too, my fingers tight around the steering wheel. The card's phone number played on a loop in my mind. Who had left it? The intruder? The man who'd claimed Abby was his dog? Or someone else entirely? My apartment was small, a 1-bedroom with peeling paint and a couch that sagged in the middle. But it was safe, or at least it was supposed to be. Abby sniffed every corner before finally settling on the rug near the window, her body curled tight. I pulled out the business card and turned it over in my hands. Calling the number felt like a trap, but ignoring it felt just as dangerous. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Carter. "Don't touch that card. Meet me at the old feed store at dawn. Bring Abby." I didn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every car that passed outside sent my heart racing. Abby didn't sleep either. She'd doze for a few minutes, then jerk awake, her ears twitching at sounds I couldn't hear. Around 4 a.m., she suddenly stood, her nose pressed to the crack under the front door. A low growl rumbled in her chest. I froze, then I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Stopping right outside my apartment. The knob turned. Just a fraction. Just enough to tell me someone was testing it. I grabbed Abby's collar and backed into the bathroom, locking the door behind us. My hand shook as I fumbled with my phone, ready to call the police, but then silence. No more footsteps. No more testing the lock. After 10 minutes of unbearable tension, I peeked out. The apartment was empty. The front door was still closed. But on the floor, just inside the threshold, was a single sheet of paper. It was a photograph. A grainy, black and white image of a facility. Concrete walls, steel doors, rows of cages. And in one of those cages, a German shepherd with a familiar scar above her paw. Abby. The photo was dated 3 months ago. At the bottom, scrawled in red ink, "She belongs to us." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a dog. Abby was part of something bigger, something hidden. And they were making it clear. They knew where we were. They could get to us any time. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. The old feed store was abandoned, its windows boarded up, its parking lot cracked with weeds. Dr. Carter's truck was already there when I arrived, parked behind the building where it couldn't be seen from the road. He stepped out as soon as I pulled in, his face drawn. "You got the card?" I handed it to him. He studied it, then pulled out his own phone and dialed a number, but not the one on the card. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to me. "We have to move, now." "Move where?" I asked. "Somewhere they won't find her." He nodded at Abby, who was watching us intently. "I called an old friend. He's got a place off-grid, no records, no paper trail." Before I could respond, Abby suddenly stiffened, her head snapping toward the road. A second later, I heard it too, the rumble of an engine. Too smooth to be a farm truck, too quiet to be innocent. Dr. Carter cursed under his breath. "They followed you." A black SUV rolled into the lot, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. It stopped 20 feet from us, idling, waiting. Then the passenger window rolled down. A hand emerged, holding a device, small, rectangular, with a single blinking red light. Abby's reaction was instant. She recoiled like she'd been struck, a whine tearing from her throat. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the ground, trembling violently. The device was emitting a frequency, one that affected her. Dr. Carter grabbed my arm. "Get her in the truck, now!" As I scooped Abby up, the SUV's engine revved. It wasn't here to talk. It was here to take her back. The tires of Dr. Carter's truck screeched as we fishtailed out of the feed store parking lot, gravel spraying behind us. Abby lay trembling on the seat between us, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The black SUV kept pace, its headlights glaring in the rearview mirror like predators' eyes. I clutched Abby tighter, feeling her heart hammer against my chest. "What the hell was that device?" I shouted over the roar of the engine. Dr. Carter's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "A trigger. They're using frequencies to control her." His voice was grim. The implications hit me like a punch. This wasn't just tracking technology. They'd wired something into Abby's very nervous system. We took a sharp turn down a dirt road, the truck bouncing violently as we left pavement behind. Dust clouded the air, giving us temporary cover. Dr. Carter reached under his seat and pulled out a pistol, checking the magazine with practiced ease. The casual way he handled the weapon told me this wasn't his first time running from danger. "There's an old hunting cabin about 3 miles north," he said. "We'll lose them there." Abby suddenly lifted her head, her nose twitching. Before I could react, she scrambled into the back seat and started pawing frantically at my backpack. "What's she doing?" Dr. Carter glanced back. "She smells something." I yanked the backpack open and froze. The photograph from my apartment, the one showing Abby in that facility, was glowing. Not metaphorically. The edges were literally emitting a faint blue luminescence. "What the—" I pulled it out just as we hit a pothole, sending the photo fluttering to the floorboard. Where it landed, the image changed. The cages faded, replaced by a map with coordinates. Numbers along the edge pulsed rhythmically, matching the blinking light from the SUV's device. Abby whined and backed away, her tail tucked between her legs. Dr. Carter's eyes widened. "It's a beacon. They've been tracking us through the damn photo." He slammed on the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked. The truck skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. "Out! Now!" We barely had time to grab Abby and dive into the underbrush before the SUV came roaring around the bend. Dr. Carter threw the glowing photo into the road just as the vehicle sped past us. The effect was immediate. The SUV's brakes screamed as it swerved to follow the beacon now lying on the dirt road, giving us precious seconds to disappear into the woods. The hunting cabin turned out to be a crumbling shack barely standing between 2 oak trees. As we approached, Abby suddenly planted her feet and refused to move further. Her ears flattened against her skull as she stared at the door. "She's never been here before," Dr. Carter murmured, "but she knows this place." He drew his pistol and motioned for me to stay back as he kicked the door open. The smell hit us first, antiseptic and something metallic. Then the sight, a single metal table bolted to the floor, restraints hanging from the sides, dark stains on the wood planks, and on the far wall, scratched into the paint in what looked like claw marks, the word Hazel. Abby let out a sound I'd never heard from a dog before, something between a howl and a scream. She backed away, her body low to the ground. That's when I noticed the small black box mounted above the doorframe, its red light blinking in sync with Abby's panicked breathing. Dr. Carter didn't hesitate, he shot it, the gunshot deafening in the confined space. The light died. Abby stopped shaking. From outside came the sound of engines, not just the SUV this time. Multiple vehicles, doors slamming, voices shouting coordinates. They'd followed the decoy photo, but not for long. Dr. Carter grabbed my arm. "There's a storm cellar out back. Get Abby in there and don't come out until I say so." The cellar was damp and dark, the air thick with the smell of earth. Abby pressed against me as heavy footsteps circled the cabin above. Then a voice, amplified by a megaphone. "We know you're here, Carter. Just give us the dog and walk away." Dr. Carter's response was another gunshot. The resulting chaos, shouts, return fire, the splintering of wood, seemed to go on forever. Abby suddenly tensed, her nose pointed at the cellar door. That's when I heard it. The faintest scraping sound from the other side. Someone was coming in. The door burst open just as Abby launched herself forward. Not at the armed man standing there, but at the device in his hand, the same frequency emitter from before. She tore it from his grip with her teeth, the crunch of breaking electronics mixing with the man's shout of surprise. In the confined space, the sound of Dr. Carter's pistol was like thunder. The man dropped. More shouts from outside. A engine revving. Then suddenly, an explosion that shook the ground. The cabin above us was on fire, flames licking through the cellar door's cracks. Dr. Carter appeared at the top of the stairs, his face streaked with soot. "We have to move, now!" He led us through a narrow tunnel I wouldn't have noticed, the walls close enough to scrape my shoulders. Abby moved ahead of us, her tail just visible in the darkness. She knew the way. We emerged in a thicket half a mile from the burning cabin. Distant sirens wailed. Someone had called the fire department. Dr. Carter wiped blood from his brow and looked at Abby, who was sitting calmly now, watching the smoke rise in the distance. "They'll think we died in that fire," he said. "It'll buy us time." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a map with 3 locations circled. "Abby wasn't the only one," he said quietly. "There are others." The map trembled in my hands. 2 more facilities. 2 more dogs like Abby. And if we were right, 2 more living weapons someone would kill to get back. The map burned in my hands as we sped away from the burning cabin, the acrid smell of smoke clinging to our clothes. Dr. Carter drove with mechanical precision, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror Abby lay across, my lap, her body still tense but no longer shaking. The destruction of that frequency emitter had given her some relief, though her ears remained pricked for any unusual sound. The 3 circled locations on the map taunted me. 2 more facilities, 2 more potential victims of whatever nightmare project Abby had escaped from. The closest was an abandoned water treatment plant just across state lines, a sprawling complex that had been shut down after environmental violations. "That's where we're going first," Dr. Carter said, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. "If there are others like Abby, we can't leave them there." Night had fallen by the time we reached the outskirts of the facility, the chain-link fence sagging in places where trespassers had cut through over the years. We parked a mile away and approached on foot, using the tree line for cover. Abby moved like a shadow beside us, her paws making no sound on the damp earth. The facility loomed ahead, rusted pipes, crumbling concrete, and a main building with half its windows shattered. But as we got closer, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Fresh tire tracks in the mud leading to a side entrance. And the padlock on the gate? Brand new. Dr. Carter pulled me behind a stack of decaying barrels. "They're still using this place," he whispered. "Or someone is." Abby suddenly stiffened, her nose twitching. Then I smelled it too. A chemical tang beneath the mildew, something sterile and artificial that didn't belong in this derelict place. We followed the scent to a service door that had been recently oiled, its hinges silent when Dr. Carter eased it open. The interior was nothing like the decay outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the floors were clean, and the air carried that same antiseptic stench from the cabin. Abby's reaction was immediate. She dropped into a crouch, a low growl building in her throat. She recognized this place. We moved down a corridor lined with sealed doors, each marked with numbered keypads. At the 3rd door, the keypad was dark, powered down. Dr. Carter pried the cover off and crossed a few wires. The door hissed open, revealing a lab straight out of a nightmare. Monitors lined one wall, most displaying static, but one showed a live feed of a kennel area where 3 dogs paced restlessly in individual cages. They were all German shepherds, all with the same intelligent, haunted eyes as Abby. And on the far wall, a massive project logo. Hazel 2. A clipboard lay on a nearby desk. I flipped through it, my stomach churning at the clinical descriptions of auditory conditioning and response thresholds. but one page stopped me cold. A log entry dated just 2 days ago. Subject Delta, unresponsive to recall frequency, shows signs of cognitive override similar to initial Hazel 7. Termination ordered. Hazel 7. Abby's designation. She hadn't just escaped, she'd been written off, and now they were doing the same to others. Abby nudged my hand urgently. Then I heard it. Footsteps approaching, accompanied by the staticky crackle of a radio. Check the west corridor again. Motion sensors triggered. Dr. Carter shoved the clipboard into his jacket and motioned us toward a ventilation grate. We barely had time to duck inside before the door opened. Through the slats, I watched 2 figures in tactical gear enter, their weapons drawn. Not military, not police, private security, with no insignia on their uniforms. The taller one tapped his earpiece. No sign of intrusion in Lab 3, probably just another rat. The other man snorted. Wouldn't be the first time. This place is falling apart. They left without checking the vent. We crawled through the ductwork, following Abby as she led us toward the kennel area. The vents opened into an observation room overlooking the cages. Below, the 3 dogs had gone still, their heads cocked toward the vent. They'd heard us, or maybe they'd smelled Abby. One, a male with a jagged scar across his muzzle, let out a soft whine. Abby responded with a barely audible chuff. They knew each other. Dr. Carter was already working on the vent cover when the lights suddenly flickered. An alarm blared to life, red emergency lights pulsing. Unauthorized access in Sector B, a mechanized voice announced. All personnel to lockdown positions. They'd found the open door. We had minutes at best. The vent cover came loose just as the kennel door burst open. A guard stepped in, his weapon raised. Not at us, but at the dogs. "Sorry, Mutz," he muttered, flicking off the safety. "Orders are orders." Abby moved faster than I could blink. She launched herself from the vent, hitting the guard square in the back. The gun went off, the shot ricocheting off the concrete floor as man and dog went down in a snarling heap. We dropped down after her, Doctor. Carter immediately going for the weapon while I worked on the cage locks. The scarred male was first out, followed by a smaller female missing part of ear. The third, a younger dog with terrified eyes, shrank back until Abby went to him, licking his face once before nudging him toward us. The guard was unconscious but breathing. Dr. Carter took his keycard and radio. "We need to move. Now." The scarred male grabbed the guard's sleeve in his teeth, dragging him into an empty cage before slamming the door shut with his paw. Smart. Very smart. We fled through a service tunnel, the dogs keeping perfect formation around us. The alarms faded behind us, but the shouts didn't. They were spreading out, searching. The tunnel ended at a drainage ditch outside the fence line. We were almost clear when the youngest dog suddenly froze, his body rigid. A second later, a high-pitched whine cut through the night, the same frequency that had debilitated Abby earlier. Only this time it wasn't coming from a handheld device. It was coming from the sky. A drone hovered above us, its red light blinking in sync with the pulsing tone. The dogs collapsed, writhing in pain. All except Abby. She stood her ground, lips peeled back in a snarl, staring down the machine like she'd been waiting for this moment. Then she did something impossible. She barked in perfect rhythm with the frequency, not random noise but a precise, deliberate countertone. The drone's light flickered. The whine stuttered. For 3 heartbeats, the 2 sounds clashed. Then the drone's light died, and it dropped like a stone into the underbrush. The other dogs staggered to their feet, shaking their heads. Dr. Carter looked at Abby like he was seeing her for the first time. "She didn't just learn to resist their control," he breathed. "She learned to fight back." From the facility, more shouts, closer now. We ran for the trees, the dogs keeping pace. Behind us, floodlights snapped on, sweeping the grounds. We'd gotten them out. But as I glanced back, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. A figure standing atop the main building, watching us flee through binoculars. Even at this distance, I recognized the two clean boots. The man who'd come for Abby at the clinic. And he was smiling. The forest swallowed us whole as we ran, branches whipping at our faces and roots threatening to trip us with every step. The 3 rescued dogs moved like ghosts beside Abby, their movements synchronized as if they'd trained together for years. Dr. Carter led the way, his breath coming in ragged gasps but his grip on the stolen pistol never wavering. Behind us, the facility's floodlights cut through the trees like searchlights, and the occasional shout confirmed they weren't giving up the chase. Abby kept looking back, her ears twitching at sounds the rest of us couldn't hear. Then, without warning, she darted off the path, disappearing into the underbrush. The other dogs hesitated for only a second before following her. Dr. Carter grabbed my arm before I could call out. "She knows what she's doing," he hissed. We found them 50 yards off the trail, gathered around a rusted metal hatch nearly invisible beneath a tangle of ivy. Abby was scratching at it insistently, her claws leaving fresh marks in the weathered steel. When Dr. Carter pulled the hatch open, the smell that wafted out was dank and metallic, but beneath it lingered that same sterile chemical odor from the facility. A set of narrow stairs descended into darkness. The scarred male dog went first, his tail held high. We had no flashlights, no way of knowing what waited below, but the approaching shouts left us no choice. The tunnel was colder than expected, the walls slick with condensation. As our eyes adjusted, faint emergency lighting revealed itself. Dim red bulbs spaced every 20 feet, just enough to navigate by. The floor was littered with discarded syringes and shredded documents, most too damaged to read. But one partially intact page caught my eye. A memo dated 6 months ago with the heading, Hazel 7 Retrieval Protocol. Abby's ears perked up at the sound of crinkling paper as I picked it up. The text was mostly illegible, but one phrase stood out clearly. Subject has demonstrated cognitive resistance beyond projected parameters. If recovery proves impossible, activate sterilization protocol for all Hazel series assets. A low growl from ahead snapped my attention back to the present. The scarred male had frozen, his body rigid. The tunnel ended at a heavy door marked with faded biohazard symbols. Abby approached it cautiously, sniffing along the frame before looking back at us with an expression I couldn't read. Dr. Carter tried the handle, locked, but the key card he'd taken from the guard slid into the reader with a soft click. The door hissed open, revealing a scene that made my stomach drop. The room was a laboratory, but unlike the sterile space we'd just escaped, this one looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Monitors were smashed, chairs overturned, and a thick layer of dust covered everything except the cages. 6 of them, arranged in a perfect semicircle, each with a nameplate, Hazel 1 through Hazel 6. All empty, all spotlessly clean, as if they'd been scrubbed repeatedly. The air smelled sharply of bleach beneath the decay. Abby moved to the center cage, Hazel 4, and pressed her nose against the bars, whining softly. The other dogs fanned out, each investigating a different cage with an intensity that suggested recognition. The youngest, the one who'd been so afraid earlier, began to tremble violently near Hazel 6's enclosure. That's when I noticed the stains on the floor, dark streaks leading from each cage to a drain in the center of the room. Too much liquid to be just water. Too dark to be anything but. A sudden clang from the tunnel made us all jump. Distant footsteps echoed, accompanied by the static of radios. They'd found the hatch. Dr. Carter swore under his breath and moved to a computer terminal in the corner. The screen flickered to life when he touched the keyboard, displaying a login prompt. "We need to know what happened here," he muttered, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. "This might take a minute." Abby suddenly lunged for the door, slamming it shut with her body just as the first flashlight beam appeared down the tunnel. The impact shook the frame, but the lock held. For now. The other dogs formed a defensive line, their lips curled back in silent snarls. Dr. Carter's fingers flew over the keyboard, the screen flashing through error messages before finally displaying a directory. "Got it," he whispered, copying files at breakneck speed. The first bullet hit the door with a deafening crack, splintering the metal near the handle. Abby didn't flinch. The second shot was followed by a voice, the same one from the clinic, calm and measured. "Joshua, Dr. Carter, you've seen what we're capable of. Hand over the subjects, and this ends now." Dr. Carter yanked the USB free and tossed it to me. "The files are encrypted, but my contact can break them. Get the dogs out." He stood, leveling his pistol at the door. "There's another exit through that vent." He nodded to a ceiling panel barely large enough for a person. "It leads to the river. Another bullet." The door buckled. Abby looked from me to Dr. Carter, her eyes wide. The other dogs whined, their gazes darting between us and the vent. They understood. Too well. The scarred male suddenly jumped onto a lab table, using it as a springboard to reach the vent cover. He tore it free with his teeth, sending it clattering to the floor. The female with the torn ear nudged the youngest dog toward me insistently. They were making sure we got out. Dr. Carter took position behind an overturned table. "Go!" I boosted the youngest dog into the vent, then the female. The scarred male hesitated, looking back at Abby. She barked once, sharp and commanding, and he obeyed, disappearing into the ductwork. Abby stayed rooted in place, her eyes locked on mine. The door burst open. Time seemed to slow. The man from the clinic stepped through, flanked by 2 armed guards. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the empty cages before settling on Abby. "Hazel 7, he said, almost fondly. "We've missed you." Dr. Carter fired. One guard went down. The other returned fire, forcing us to dive for cover. Abby moved like lightning, streaking across the room to sink her teeth into the second guard's leg. The man screamed, his shot going wild as he stumbled back. The leader didn't flinch. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black device, different from the frequency emitter. Sleeker, more refined. When he pressed the button, Abby's entire body seized mid-leap. She crashed to the floor, convulsing. "No!" I scrambled toward her, but Dr. Carter grabbed my collar, hauling me back just as another bullet whizzed past my head. "The vent!" Now. I climbed blindly, the sounds of struggle fading behind me. The duct was cramped and dark, the metal groaning under my weight. Somewhere ahead, the other dogs waited. Behind me, only silence, then a single gunshot, and Abby's howl of rage. The duct opened into a storm drain that emptied into the riverbank. The 3 dogs were already there, pacing anxiously. I collapsed on the muddy shore, the USB drive clutched in my shaking hand. The files had better be worth it, because whatever was on them was all we had left now. As if sensing my thoughts, the scarred male dog nudged my arm. When I looked up, he was holding something in his mouth, a small silver key card I hadn't noticed before. On it, printed in tiny letters, Project Phoenix, authorization level, Omega. Somewhere in the distance, Abby's howl came again. Closer this time, And it didn't sound like pain, it sounded like a warning. The river's current carried us half a mile downstream before we dragged ourselves onto the opposite bank, coughing up brackish water and shivering in the pre-dawn chill. The 3 dogs shook themselves off with military precision, their ears constantly swiveling to catch any sound of pursuit. The USB drive and mysterious keycard were safely tucked in my waterproof pocket, but the weight of what we'd left behind, Dr. Carter, Abby, made each breath feel like swallowing glass. The scarred male dog, I'd started calling him Ghost for his pale muzzle and silent movements, nudged my hand with his nose, then turned to stare intently at the tree line. That's when I heard it. The distant whine of an engine cutting through the morning fog. Not a truck, something smaller. A motorcycle, maybe. We barely had time to scramble into the underbrush before the bike appeared, its headlight cutting a narrow beam through the mist. The rider wore all black, their face obscured by a helmet, but the way they moved, scanning the riverbank methodically, spoke of training. Ghost bared his teeth silently while the other 2 dogs melted into the shadows. The rider killed the engine and removed their helmet, revealing a woman's face. Sharp features, dark hair pulled into a tight braid, and a scar running from her temple to her jawline. She didn't call out, just stood there, waiting. Then she reached into her jacket. My hand closed around a rock, ready to fight, but what she pulled out wasn't a weapon, it was a dog whistle. The note she blew was too high for human ears, but the effect on the dogs was instant. Ghost's ears perked up, his tail giving a single hesitant wag. The woman smiled grimly. "I was afraid you'd all been terminated," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Especially you, Delta." She was looking directly at Ghost. I stepped out of hiding, my hands raised. The woman didn't seem surprised. "Joshua Carter," she said. It wasn't a question. "Your uncle told me you'd be with them." My blood ran cold. "Dr. Carter is alive," she interrupted. "For now. They took him to the secondary facility, along with your little miracle, Hazel, 7 inches. She held up a phone showing a live feed. Abby in a transport cage, her eyes blazing with fury as the van bounced down a dirt road. The timestamp was 20 minutes old. "I'm Elena Braith, former lead behavioral neurologist for Project Hazel, and if you want to save them, you'll need to trust me." The name clicked. The memo in the tunnel had mentioned a doctor. B. Opposing termination protocols. Elena didn't wait for my response, just swung her leg back over the bike. "There's a safe house 3 miles east. We'll talk there." Ghost trotted to her side without hesitation, confirming what I'd suspected. He knew her. The other 2 dogs looked to me for direction. Every instinct screamed this was a trap, but the USB drive in my pocket seemed to pulse with urgency, and Abby was running out of time. The safe house turned out to be a renovated ranger station so well hidden I would have walked right past it. Inside, maps and surveillance photos covered every wall, all centered on one location, a private research compound listed as an agricultural testing site. Helena tossed me a towel before pouring kibble for the dogs. "That key card you found is the only way into Phoenix Wing," she said, watching me closely. "Where they're keeping the original Hazel Project data, and where they've taken your friends." I pulled out the USB drive. "We have files. Corrupted," she cut in. "Standard protocol when facilities are breached, but the data on that key card," her fingers twitched. "That's what Keller will really kill to protect." A monitor on the desk flickered to life, showing a satellite view of the compound. Elena zoomed in on a nondescript outbuilding. "This is where they're holding Carter, and this," the image shifted to a kennel area. Abby paced her cage, but something was wrong. Her movements were jerky, unnatural. Wires ran from pads on her head to a monitoring station. They've reactivated her implant. Ghost whined, pressing against my leg. On screen, Abby suddenly stopped pacing. Her head lifted, ears pricking forward as if she'd heard something. Then, impossibly, she turned. Not toward the camera, but directly at the observation window where Keller stood watching, and bared her teeth in what could only be called a smile. Elena inhaled sharply. She's not just resisting the programming anymore, she's hijacking their systems. The feed glitched, static washing across the screen. When it cleared, text scrolled rapidly in a corner of the monitor, code being rewritten in real time. "They think they're studying her," Elena whispered, "but she's studying them." The computer pinged, an alert. Elena pulled up a new window showing a delivery manifest. "They're moving her at dawn, to a secure location." Her face went pale. The same place they took Hazel 1 through 6. A printer hummed to life, spitting out blueprints. Elena grabbed them, her hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We have one shot, tonight, before they erase everything." She looked at the dogs, then at me. All of us, because whatever Abby's planning, she's counting on us to be ready. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Or maybe it was an explosion. The storm was coming, and somehow I knew Abby had planned it that way. The storm hit just before midnight, rain slashing against the safe house windows like nails as Elena spread the blueprints across the table. The compound's layout was a maze of security checkpoints and motion sensors, but one path stood out. A service tunnel marked waste disposal that ran directly beneath the Phoenix wing. "They clean it weekly," Elena said, tracing the route with a finger. "The biometric scanners are offline for exactly 27 minutes during maintenance." She glanced at the clock, "which starts in 1 hour." Ghost whined softly, his eyes fixed on the security feed still showing Abby's cage. The image flickered every few seconds now, the camera struggling as whatever Abby was doing to their systems spread. Elena handed me an earpiece and a slim black device that looked like a garage door opener. "This will disrupt their frequencies for about 90 seconds, long enough to get through the outer doors." She hesitated, then added, "Don't use it unless you have to. They'll know we're coming the second it activates." The other 2 dogs, Patch for her torn ear and Kid the youngest, stood rigidly at attention by the door. They'd been different since seeing Abby on that feed, sharper, more focused, like soldiers prepping for a mission they'd trained their whole lives for. We left in Elena's truck, the dogs hidden under a tarp in back. The compound's perimeter fence appeared through the rain, its razor wire glinting under floodlights. A guard patrol passed by at exact 6-minute intervals. We had a 3-minute window after each pass to cut through the fence and reach the tunnel entrance. Elena checked her watch. Next patrol in 90 seconds. The rain masked the sound of the wire cutters, but nothing could hide the way my hands shook. The service tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare. Damp concrete walls slick with algae, the air thick with the stench of chemicals and something metallic. The dogs moved like shadows ahead of us, their paws making no sound. Every 50 feet, emergency lights cast a sickly green glow, revealing faded warnings, biohazard and restricted access. Then, up ahead, a sound that didn't belong, the murmur of voices and the beep of a scanning device. Elena froze. Maintenance crews early. We pressed against the wall as the voices grew closer. 2 men complaining about overtime. Their footsteps stopped just around the bend. A locker creaked open. "Just dump the old samples and reset the scanners," one said. "Keller wants everything wiped before transport." A clang of metal on metal. "What about the live ones?" the other asked. A pause. Same as the others. Sedation at 0400, then the incinerator. Elena's hand clamped over my mouth before the gasp could escape. The dogs didn't need the warning. They'd gone statue still. The men moved off, their voices fading. Only when the scan of a biometric lock confirmed they'd gone through a security door did Elena release me. "They're killing them all tonight," she breathed. "Abby, Carter, the whole program." The tunnel ended at a grate leading upward. Elena disabled the alarm with a handheld device while Ghost sniffed the air. His ears flattened. A warning. Something was wrong. The grate opened into a pristine white hallway, completely at odds with the decay below. Emergency lights pulsed near the ceiling. Not red, purple, a lockdown signal, but different from standard protocols. From somewhere overhead, a voice announced, "Containment breach in Sector 7. All personnel to evacuation points." Elena paled. "That's the kennel sector." She pulled up a live feed on her phone. The image showed Abby's cage door hanging open. The camera angle jerked wildly as someone ran past, shouting. Then, clear as day, a familiar bark echoed through the speakers. Not from the phone, from down the hall. We ran. The corridor branched in 3 directions. Left led to labs, right to administrative offices. Center doors bore the Phoenix insignia, and crumpled against them, unconscious, were 2 guards. Their key cards were missing. The doors were slightly ajar. Inside was a control room, straight out of a sci-fi nightmare. Banks of monitors showing every corner of the compound. A central console with a dozen empty syringes scattered across it, and in the center of it all, a single steel chair with restraints. Dr. Carter sat slumped in it, his face bruised, but his eyes open and alert. "Took you long enough," he croaked, then nodded toward the monitors. "She's leading them on a merry chase." The screens showed chaos. Guards running down corridors. Doors sealing unexpectedly. And in the center of it all, Abby, moving with purpose, not panic. She'd stop occasionally to press her nose against a scanner, and somewhere in the compound a door would unlock. She wasn't escaping, she was hurting them. Dr. Carter struggled against his restraints. The dogs, Hazel 1 through 6, they're not dead. Keller moved them here after the first facility was compromised. He nodded to a monitor labeled Specimen Storage. The image showed 6 cages, all occupied. All with German shepherds that looked up as if sensing the camera, their eyes eerily focused. A new alert blared. "Containment failure. Initiate sterilization protocol." The lights shifted from purple to pulsing red. Elena cursed. "They're going to gas the whole facility." She rushed to the console, typing frantically. "I can override from here, but it'll take time." Ghost suddenly lunged for the door, Patch and Kid right behind him. They didn't bark, didn't growl, just looked at us with an intelligence that sent chills down my spine. Then they were gone, streaking down the hall toward specimen storage. Dr. Carter finally worked one hand free and grabbed my arm. "Abby didn't escape by accident, Kid. She was designed to get out, to find help." He pointed to the main monitor, where Abby now stood before a sealed door marked Server Room. As we watched, she rose onto her hind legs and pressed her paw against the biometric pad. The light turned green. The door slid open. And from the speakers, a voice that wasn't human, wasn't canine, but something in between crackled through. "Access granted. Welcome, Administrator Hazel 7. The voice coming through the speakers didn't sound like Abby. It was too mechanical, too precise, but the way her head tilted at the sound confirmed it was her, or at least her implant. Dr. Carter finally freed himself from the chair, rubbing his wrists. "They never just wanted obedient dogs," he said hoarsely. "They wanted infiltrators. ones that could bypass security without raising alarms. On the monitors, Abby stood motionless before the server room's blinking terminals, her body rigid in a way that looked almost robotic. Then, suddenly, she shook herself like she was coming out of a trance and lunged for the nearest console, her teeth closing around a bundle of wires. The lights flickered. Elena's fingers flew across the control panel. She's trying to download something. The compound's PA system crackled again, that same synthetic voice announcing, "Data transfer initiated. Estimated completion 4 minutes." A countdown appeared on the main screen, 3:59, 3:58. Outside, the sound of running footsteps grew louder. They'd track the signal disruption straight to us. Dr. Carter grabbed a fallen guard's pistol. "We need to hold this room until she finishes." He tossed me a stun gun from the console drawer. Elena didn't look up from her typing. I'm trying to buy her time, rerouting their security feeds, locking down corridors. The countdown hit 3:30 when the first gunshot echoed through the hallway. The door shuddered under the impact. Then silence. Too much silence. The next attack didn't come from the door. It came from the vents. A gas canister clattered to the floor, hissing white smoke. Elena slapped a breather mask over her face before tossing us 2 more. Sedative gas. They want us alive. The door burst open, masked figures pouring in with rifles raised. Dr. Carter fired once, a warning shot that sent them scrambling for cover, but we were outnumbered, outgunned. Then the screaming started. Not from our hallway, from the monitors. The feed showing specimen storage was chaos, cage doors swinging open, guards stumbling back as 6 German shepherds moved with terrifying coordination. Ghost led the pack, his scarred muzzle streaked with red as he herded the panicking personnel into a corner. But it was what happened next that froze my blood. The dogs didn't attack, they corralled. Like sheepdogs with a flock, they drove the guards into a tight group, then stood guard, growling but not biting. Waiting. On another screen, Abby had finished her data transfer. The voice announced, "Phoenix protocol retrieved." Awaiting command. The gas was making my head swim despite the mask. Through the haze, I saw Elena typing one last command before slumping over the console. The compound's PA system boomed to life. Not the synthetic voice this time, but hers, pre-recorded. "Attention all personnel. This facility has been compromised. Hazel Protocol is now active. Repeat, Hazel Protocol is now active." The effect was instantaneous. The masked raiders froze. One pulled off his helmet, revealing a face slick with sweat. "That's not possible," he whispered. Then they were running, not toward us but away, shoving each other in their panic to reach the exits. Dr. Carter dragged Elena upright as the gas began to clear. "What the hell did you just do?" She coughed, her smile grim. Played their worst nightmare. Hazel Protocol was their fail-safe. A command that would make the dogs turn on their handlers if they ever tried to shut the project down. She nodded to the monitors where Abby now sat calmly before an open server, waiting. Except Abby rewrote the parameters. Now it just makes the system think we're the ones in control. A new alert flashed. A map of the compound with red dots converging on our location. "They're sealing the exits," Elena said, trying to trap us in. Dr. Carter checked his ammunition. "Then we go up." He pointed to a ceiling panel. "Maintenance shafts lead to the roof. There's a helipad." We moved fast. The dogs, all 7 of them now, formed a protective circle as we climbed. Abby came last, pausing to look back at the server room. The synthetic voice echoed once more. "Transfer complete." All files erased. Then the entire room went dark as sparks erupted from the consoles. The roof was a nightmare of wind and rain. The helipad sat empty, but the control booth was occupied by Keller. He stood with a pistol pressed to the head of a terrified technician. "I knew she'd come back," he shouted over the storm. "Hazel 7 was always the smartest." His gaze locked onto Abby, who stepped forward, her body language calm, too calm. "You rewrote your own code, didn't you?" Keller murmured, almost admiring. "Made yourself something new." Abby's response wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a sequence of quick, precise yaps, almost like Morse code. From the technician's console, a mechanical voice answered, "Affirmative." Keller's smile faded. He never saw Ghost coming. The scarred dog hit him from behind, sending the gun skittering across the wet concrete. The other dogs moved as one, surrounding Keller without touching him, not attacking, containing, just like with the guards downstairs. Elena helped the technician up. "Can you call for evac?" The man nodded shakily, reaching for the radio. Dr. Carter picked up Keller's gun, his expression unreadable as he watched Abby approach her creator. For a long moment, woman and dog just stared at each other. Then Abby did something extraordinary. She turned her back on him. The message was clear. He wasn't worth it. From below came the sound of sirens, real ones, police or maybe military. Elena's broadcast had reached someone. Keller laughed bitterly. "You think this is over?" Hazel was just phase 1. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face as he spat. "You have no idea what's coming." Abby's ears pricked up, not at Keller's words, at something beyond them. A new sound, almost lost in the storm, the steady thump, thump, thump of approaching helicopters. But not ours. And from the way Keller smiled, he'd been expecting them. The helicopters emerged from the storm like black wasps, their searchlights cutting through the rain as they circled the compound. Not military, not law enforcement. These birds were unmarked, their hulls smooth and windowless except for the cockpit. Keller's smile widened as the first one descended toward the helipad, its downdraft nearly knocking us off our feet. "Right on time," he shouted over the roar. Dr. Carter raised the pistol, but Elena grabbed his arm. "Don't! They're armored." Abby let out a sharp bark, not fear, but a command. The other dogs immediately formed up around us, their bodies tense and ready. The lead helicopter's side door slid open, revealing 3 figures in full tactical gear. No insignia, no identification. Just sleek black helmets with reflective visors that gave no hint of human faces beneath. One of them raised a device that made my blood freeze. It was identical to the frequency emitter from the cabin, but larger, more powerful. Elena shoved me toward the roof access door. "Run, now!" We barely made it inside as the first pulse hit. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. A subsonic vibration that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Behind us, the dogs staggered, all except Abby. She stood her ground at the threshold, her body rigid with effort. But even she couldn't completely resist the effects. Her legs trembled violently as she fought to stay upright. Dr. Carter slammed the door shut, cutting off the worst of the frequency, but the damage was done. Patch and Kid were already convulsing on the concrete, foam gathering at their muzzles. Ghost managed to stay on his feet, but his movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. "They've upgraded their tech," Elena gasped as we half-carried, half-dragged the dogs down the stairs. That wasn't just a control signal, it was a neural reset. The compound was in chaos. Alarms wailed, and through the windows we could see figures in black tactical gear moving methodically through the halls, not just securing the facility, erasing it. One stopped beside a wall terminal, inserted a device, and within seconds, the entire wing's lights went dark. They weren't here to retrieve Keller or the dogs. They were here to scorch the earth. Abby suddenly lunged ahead, leading us down a side corridor I hadn't noticed before, a narrow service passage marked with faded hazmat symbols. The air grew colder as we descended, the walls transitioning from drywall to bare concrete. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily in the darkness. Then the passage opened into a massive underground garage, empty except for a single armored van parked near a ramp leading up to the surface. Its engine was already running. Elena didn't hesitate. "Get in!" We piled into the back with the dogs just as gunfire echoed from the passage behind us. The van's interior was lined with equipment racks, mostly empty, but a few compartments held medical supplies and what looked like specialized dog harnesses. Dr. Carter slid into the driver's seat and slammed the accelerator before the doors were fully closed. The van shot up the ramp, crashing through a barrier and out into the storm. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought we'd made it. Then the first bullet punched through the rear door. The black helicopters were giving chase, their searchlights turning night into day as they pursued us down the access road. Dr. Carter took a hard left onto a forest trail, the van's suspension groaning in protest. Branches scraped against the sides like skeletal fingers. Elena rummaged through the equipment, coming up with a rifle and a handful of smoke grenades. Not much, but it's something. She rolled down the window and let loose a burst of gunfire at our pursuers. One of the helicopters veered off momentarily, but the others held course. Abby nudged my hand, then pointed her nose at a metal case bolted to the van's floor. Inside was a laptop, its screen dark, but a single green light pulsing steadily near the touchpad. I flipped it open. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single word: connected. Then text began scrolling. Too fast to read at first, but gradually slowing to reveal lines of code interspersed with English phrases. Primary facility compromised. Backup servers active. Phoenix protocol authenticated. Awaiting destination coordinates. Elena glanced over, her eyes widening. That's Abby's implant linking to their network. She's still inside their systems. As if to confirm, Abby let out a soft woof and pressed her nose against the screen. A map appeared, zooming in on a location deep in the Appalachian Mountains, somewhere called Site B. The van suddenly lurched violently as one of the helicopters opened fire, shredding our rear tires. Dr. Carter fought the wheel, but we were losing control. Trees rushed toward us. The last thing I saw before impact was Abby launching herself over the seats to shield me, her body a warm, living barrier between me and the crushing force of the crash. Silence. Then, through the ringing in my ears, a new sound. The steady thrum of helicopter blades slowing as they landed nearby. Boots crunching on broken glass. A voice, calm and familiar. Retrieve the subjects. Especially Hazel 7. The others, dispose of them. Abby's growl vibrated against my chest as the van's doors were wrenched open, but it wasn't the black-clad soldiers who stood there. It was Elena. Her pistol was drawn, her expression cold, and behind her Keller smiled. "Good dog," he said to Abby. "You led them right to us." The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Elena kept her gun trained on us, her expression unreadable as Keller stepped forward to clip a heavy metal collar around Abby's neck. A different model than the dampener Ethan had made, bulkier, with a blinking red light that pulsed in time with her rapid breaths. "You didn't really think a disgraced scientist would help you out of the goodness of her heart, did you?" Keller sneered, yanking Abby back by the leash now attached to her collar. She didn't resist, didn't growl, just stared at me with those golden eyes, her body trembling slightly. Dr. Carter groaned from the driver's seat, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. One of the black-clad operatives dragged him out, shoving him to his knees beside me. The other dogs were still unconscious in the wreckage, their bodies limp. The original Hazel subjects were never the end goal, Elena said, her voice clinical. They were prototypes. Abby here was the first success, a canine neural network that could infiltrate secure systems, adapt to countermeasures, and think for itself. She tapped the collar. This will keep her from accessing external signals now, permanently. Keller motioned to the operatives. Load them up. We're relocating to Site B. As they hauled us toward the waiting helicopter, I caught a flicker of movement from the van. Ghost, stirring weakly in the shadows. His eyes met mine, then slid deliberately to the left. Following his gaze, I spotted the laptop, half buried in debris but still glowing faintly. The screen now displayed a new message. Protocol Hades active. Then the text vanished, replaced by a countdown. 0, 0, 59, 0, 0, 58. Abby suddenly went rigid, her head snapping toward the laptop. Keller yanked her leash, but she didn't budge. What's wrong with it? He snapped at Elena. She frowned, checking the collar's display. It's not responding. Something's overriding the... The explosion blew out the van's remaining windows, sending a fireball roaring into the night. The force knocked Keller off his feet, the leash slipping from his grip. In the chaos, Abby lunged, not at Keller, not at Elena, but at the operative holding Dr. Carter. Her teeth closed around his wrist with a crunch, making him scream and drop his weapon. Dr. Carter didn't hesitate. He grabbed the gun and fired twice, once into the helicopter's engine, once into the cockpit window. The aircraft bucked violently, its rotors screeching as the pilot fought to keep it steady. Elena shouted orders, but no one was listening anymore. Abby barked once, sharply, and from the burning van, Ghost emerged, limping but alive. Behind him, Patch and Kid staggered to their paws, their movements sluggish but determined. They formed a loose circle around us, their lips peeled back in silent snarls. Keller scrambled backward, his face a mask of fury and something else. Fear. "You don't understand what you're ruining," he screamed over the roar of the flames. This technology could revolutionize warfare, could save thousands of... A new sound cut him off. Sirens, real ones, closing in fast. Elena's head whipped toward the road. Police. She made a sharp gesture to the remaining operatives. Fall back. They grabbed Keller, dragging him toward the damaged helicopter. He fought them, his eyes locked on Abby. This isn't over. The helicopter lifted off unsteadily, vanishing into the storm just as the first police cruisers skidded into view. Dr. Carter shoved the gun into my hands and slumped against a tree, his breathing ragged. "Play along," he muttered. "We were kidnapped. We know nothing." Abby sat beside me, her warm weight pressing against my leg. The collar around her neck had stopped blinking, its light dead. But as the officers approached, their flashlights sweeping over us, I noticed something they didn't. The laptop screen, now cracked and smoking, still flickering with one final message. Data transmitted, awaiting instructions. And Abby's tail gave one slow, deliberate wag. The police lights painted the rain in flashes of red and blue as the officers swarmed the wreckage. We played our parts perfectly. Terrified survivors, kidnapped by unknown assailants, remembering nothing useful. The unconscious dogs were rushed to an emergency veterinary team while paramedics checked us over. No one questioned the strange collar around Abby's neck. They assumed it was just a tracking device. By dawn, we were released with vague promises of a follow-up investigation that would never come. Elena and Keller were gone, their operation scattered, but the laptop's final message haunted me. Data transmitted. To where? To whom? Dr. Carter noticed my unease as we drove away in a borrowed truck. The 3 surviving dogs, Ghost, Patch, and Kid, curled together in the back. Abby sat between us, her head resting on my lap. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "People like Keller don't give up." But Abby lifted her head and licked my hand, her eyes clear and focused. Not the eyes of a weapon, not the eyes of an experiment, just a dog, a smart one, yes, a brave one, absolutely. But at her core, she'd made her choice. Not for a program, not for a mission, but for the people and dogs she'd decided were worth protecting. We drove until the sun broke through the storm clouds, turning the wet pavement into a ribbon of gold. Dr. Carter pulled over at a roadside diner, the kind with sticky floors and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. As we ate, Abby suddenly perked up, her ears twitching. A news report played on the diner's grainy TV. Mysterious explosion at a remote research facility in the Appalachians. Authorities report no casualties, but evidence suggests. The screen cut to static for a split second, just long enough for me to catch a flicker of familiar code in the distortion. Abby's tail thumped once against the booth. Dr. Carter followed my gaze and sighed. "We're never going to be rid of this, are we?" But he was smiling as he said it. I scratched behind Abby's ears, feeling the faint ridge of scar tissue where her implant had been. "Doesn't matter," I said. "We've got everything we need right here. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it." More lesson. The true measure of intelligence isn't control, it's choice. Abby, designed to obey, became something greater by choosing loyalty over programming. In a world that often tries to condition us, her story reminds us that our greatest strength lies in deciding who we protect, who we trust, and what we're willing to fight for. Some bonds can't be manufactured. Some codes can't be hacked. And no matter how someone tries to design you, your choices define you in the end. The road ahead was long, but for now the sun was shining. Abby leaned against me, warm and solid and alive. That was enough.